Corruption and state capture in South Africa has, of course, often involved big contracts entered into by government or state-owned entities. So this is all about procurement. Let's talk about the trends and the risks. Corruption Watch has released its Procurement Risk Trends 2023 report, focusing on deviations and contract expansions. Corruption Watch has been working with procurement law expert Professor Geo Quinot of Stellenbosch University, and he joins us now. Professor, thank you very much. Firstly, a quick explanation. What is a deviation?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. So a deviation is where there's a certain prescribed procedure to follow to procure, that's to acquire a certain good or service. And then, for whatever reason, you deviate from that prescribed procedure. You do something different. So to put it in very practical terms, let's say the rule is you should get 3 quotations before you're allowed to proceed with the acquisition. And then, for whatever reason, you don't get 3 quotations, you go straight to a particular supplier and you just buy from that supplier. That's what we call a deviation.
And Treasury has to approve that. So that is the check and balance. But can we agree it has been a way for corrupt individuals to get around some of the tight restrictions, and sometimes Treasury has had to work with the information it has?
Yes, absolutely. So just a small correction there. Treasury doesn't have to approve it. They only take note of it. It is the accounting officer of the relevant entity that has to approve it. And therein lies the problem. Because quite often there's disagreement about whether the relevant ground upon which this deviation was approved was indeed an acceptable ground to deviate from the prescribed procedure. And as you rightly point out, that's become a major site for abuse of the procurement system. You can imagine that if you've got a favored supplier that you've got a corrupt relationship with, this would be a perfect mechanism to channel your contracts to that supplier and then just make up whatever reason you can think of as an ostensible ground for deviating from the prescribed procedure.
And the same presumably for expansions. We've seen a lot of big contracts in South Africa, starting at a certain price. A few years later, it's just much bigger and way more expensive.
Absolutely. And again, you know, if you've got an existing contract with a supplier and that contract is about to come to an end, rather than going out into the market and following the rules to procure from a supplier through an open competitive procedure, you just extend your current contract. And again, you can easily see how a corrupt relationship can be fostered in that kind of way. And as you've said, we've seen massive increases. In this report, we've noted an increase of 120,000% on one particular contract. So that's massive.
So, okay, so let's start there. When you say 120,000%, I mean, looking at the data, because you're looking at the period 2016 to 2023. So we're not talking about history, we're talking about present day, and you're also concerned about an increase in deviations. I think you said nearly 250%. So how worried should we be?
I think we should be worried, but we should be worried for different reasons. So one of the things that we really stress in this report is that these figures and these increases do not necessarily indicate corruption. So as I've indicated, there are valid reasons for deviating. Sometimes, you know, a deviation is the only correct way to proceed. Otherwise, you'll be wasting public resources. So take the example of a procurement where there's only one supplier in the country that can objectively supply you with the goods. Then it'll be a waste of taxpayers' money to go out for open bidding and you know, spend all the money. You should rather just go to that supplier. But that's not always the case. So what the red flag we're raising with these figures to say something is wrong in the procurement system when we see a 50% increase in the number of deviations. And the easiest two explanations for that would be, on the one hand, there continues to be abuse of the system. People continue not to follow the rules for problematic reasons. And secondly, the system does not seem to be fit for purpose. That means that there are certain areas of procurement where our current rules are not serving us well. And as a result, these exceptions, that should really just be exceptions, are becoming the norm in certain circumstances. And the effect of all of this is that it becomes really difficult to identify the instances of abuse from those instances where there's a legitimate deviation because the system is not allowing us to do what we should do. And that should be, to anyone, a major cause for concern.
Okay, so that's the problem. Who starts fixing it? Who should take this up now?
So this is, our report this year, I think, is particularly important. We've done it now for 3 years, but this year's is very important because we must remember that at the moment, there's a public procurement bill finding its way through Parliament. That bill is supposed to bring a new procurement system to South Africa to fix this mess that we're in at the moment. And it's really to that process that we should all look now. Treasury has tabled the bill, Parliament's now seized with it, it's going through the normal process, and that is, in my view, the most important starting point for fixing all of this. So what really should be happening is that we should be looking at data like this and the kind of analysis that we've done and take the lessons from it and make sure that whatever we're now putting in place, the new rules in the bill itself and then further regulations to follow, speak to these kind of concerns that we're seeing at the moment. And I think that's where our focus at the moment should be.